Hello everyone, March W13 here, this time with a fine dining restaurant review live from Austin, Texas. And this place, Barley Swine, is located near the Spyglass, Barton's Bluff, and Allendale neighborhoods, about 8 miles north of central downtown Austin. So this would be about a 10 to 15 minute drive or Uber ride if you're staying down by the lake. And you'll find this establishment in a rather unassuming strip center in a semi-suburban residential area. It's on Burnett Road, right next to an apartment complex. And on this evening, I sat out on the patio, well socially distanced from other tables. And speaking of COVID protocols, this place does it right. They provide you with a full bottle of hand sanitizer for the table, which you're welcome to keep, and then a mask holder, which may have been a to-go sleep or a dinner roll in a previous life, but nonetheless, a very nice touch. Regular old tap water is also provided by default in a carafe, and I should say this is a tasting menu only restaurant, so there are very few choices you have to make yourself as a diner. And the atmosphere here is really top notch, I think, particularly given the location. They've done an admirable job of overcoming the strip mall ambiance. And while the interior is amazing as well, these days, patio dining is where it's at. All right, let's get started. I ordered the beverage pairing, which takes all the guesswork out of dinner, and this first wine, a dry muscat, was more palate cleansing and kind of like a Prosecco. It was intended to pair with this trio of almost amuse-bouche-like bites. I found these mini dishes quite pleasing to the eye. They certainly offered some interesting textural contrasts, and I think the real star of the bunch was this pear and bacon and jalapeno dish we're looking at now. On the whole, it was a good first course, and the wine pairing was okay, but not terribly inspiring. Next up was the blue crab dish with spaghetti squash and copa. It just looks like a mound of prosciutto from here, but once you reach the layer of spaghetti squash underneath, I found it somewhat reminiscent of fresh coleslaw with some fermented flavor from the kimchi. Now, as far as the wine is concerned, the Loire Valley Pinot Noir, which is certainly unique, I just felt that the distinct strawberry notes, so they may sound like they would complement the freshness of the dish, just didn't come together for me. And here we see the squash and kimchi underneath that copa. This is another COVID innovation. A dedicated tray with a new silverware for each course arrives throughout the meal. And now we're getting into the more serious food. This is a play on a chile relleno using a battered and fried shishito pepper, although they call it a tamale. The red snapper in the sauce was just delectable, while I felt the tamale would have been better had it been prepared in tamale style rather than like a chile relleno. And then the wine, the German Pinot Blanc, not unexpectedly had some characteristics of a dry Riesling, but was also similar to an oaky Chardonnay. Again, a very unique and adventurous wine, just not an outstanding pairing in my opinion. And just look at the color and opacity of this local wine from Fredericksburg, about 80 miles west of Austin. I found it a bit sherry-like, a fortified wine with a vegetable bouquet, a very bitter taste. It almost reminded me of that episode of I Love Lucy where she does a commercial for Vitamita Vegemin. And then the shiitake and eggs dish featured what amounted to soup dumplings, bursting with creamy acidity and a hint of spice. I must say, I felt this was the first really good pairing of the night with the fortified wine. And then this duck and pancake dish was, I guess, somewhat of a French take on a Peking duck. The waiter mentioned that some people eat the duck and the pancake separately. Some use the pancake like a taco, others more like naan bread. The duck was perfectly cooked, and the pancake, which was more of a crepe, I felt was just better on its own, with a bit of baking spice and nutmeg notes. And for the second dish in a row, the food paired quite well with the Beaujolais Cru from Fleury, which was a bit dirty in the nose, but tasted of concentrated dried fruit with some leathery notes. The bar inside certainly looked lively, but again, I was quite pleased to dine in the open air this evening. And now for the main course, the Wagyu beef was cooked perfectly. A succulent ribeye, slightly smoky with hints of peppery spice. The accompaniment of fried potatoes were super crispy and a bit of a throwback, quite good with the sauce, which I felt went better with the potatoes than with the beef, which really stands quite proudly on its own. I was a bit torn on the wine, which had notes of sage and even that fortified vegetable flavor, but at least it didn't overpower the dish, so not a completely unsuccessful pairing. The watermelon sorbet was just as you'd expect. It was an effective palate cleanser that manages to offer some interesting textures and flavor combinations as well with the tomato. The evening was capped with a wonderful coffee, cappuccino. And then for dessert, the Madeira wine had a caramel note that really paired perfectly with the dessert, which featured brilliant textural contrast with the coconutty semifreddo and the corn heavy masa. And that ended the night. I have to say that despite the number of courses, it actually wasn't the most filling meal I've ever had. However, the food was very refined without being too pretentious, and I felt it was very good value wise overall. The wine was extremely interesting with some compelling pairings. I just felt that they may have missed the mark in a few of the selections. Overall, I give the food 4 out of 5 stars and the wine a 3. Either way, I'd certainly make a return visit. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.